I said that since I've been back since July, incidentally I came and tried to get organized in my office on July 3rd, which was a down day for the college, but it's quiet here in the summer, so it's good to see a lot of faces and people here. But I commented that in 9 years a lot has changed at the institution, and you know, I felt like I should have been more aware of it as an adjunct faculty member, but there are a lot of exciting things going on at Chesapeake, really some extraordinary things. And so I'm just trying to come to grips with that, to understand it, and I was really pleased that as I did a kind of a walk around on July 5th when people were coming back and to just say hello to people and that sort of thing, and a little bit on the 6th, that a lot of people would come forward and say, you know, I'm really excited about some of the new things that we're doing, some of the new initiatives, some of the new opportunities that are out there. And so I really got a sense that, because some of these are really bold strategies, this Pathways initiative, which I wasn't connected to what was happening nationally in community colleges, and so I had to kind of ramp up, and Clay's been very helpful in getting me more or less up to speed. I'm by no means there, but on what that was all about. And it's really quite an exciting and challenging initiative. And likewise, the restructuring that we did here at the institution to try to fit in with that broader vision was also bold. And I really got a sense from talking to people that they really wanted to be part of that and help make it successful. So there was really a tremendous amount of buy-in to that direction. But much is the same. I mean, I was amazed by how many people I still knew when I walked around. Which is to say, for those of you who are relatively new to the college, people stay here a long time. They like this institution, and they're committed to what we do. So you've joined, for those of you who are coming new, you've joined a real family here, which has both its strengths and its weaknesses, right? I mean, the strength is people care, but if something happens in one part of the institution, it really affects all of the institution. So, but it's a resource and a strength that we have found to be critical over the years, and we certainly want to build on that. The campus is beautiful, as it's always been, but for the people in the maintenance department who work on the campus, it really looks superb, better than when I was here. And everybody knows that I'm a nitpicker, so if I see something over here or there, you know, so it's really good. It looks really quite extraordinary. We're very fortunate to have this facility and this setting that we have. But the other thing that I noticed in walking around is how rapid the change is. And part of it's me. You know, I've been away in this role for 9 years, almost a decade. You get rusty in a lot of bad ways, and your habits and how you manage your time and things of that nature. But I don't think that's all of it. I think the pace of change at Chesapeake and trying to reach into some bold new directions has moved very quickly. And I did sense in walking around at some level, this might not ring true for you necessarily, but for some people and in some areas, I think, there's some sense that maybe we're moving faster than we can kind of keep up and make sure that all the pieces are in place to achieve our objectives. And again, you can charge some of that off to me, just getting used to it, but I think it's more than just me getting used to it. And so in some of the early discussions that I've had with the leadership team here is trying to encourage all of us, including myself, not to lay on a lot of new stuff when we've got plenty on our plate right now. So I'm hoping that one of the things I can do is help provide the support and the sense of direction and prioritization here at the institution, that we can manage this effectively, and that those of you who are dealing with these initiatives and trying to move them forward, that you think you've got time in your work schedule to really do the great job that you're capable of doing. And so I need to hear from you as we progress, if there's areas where I can, in my role here, help with that. But, you know, in talking with all the VPs, we certainly shared the view that collectively we've got a lot on our plates and we need to maybe step back a little bit and think about how we can better support what we've already got going, and maybe be a little more careful by adding too much more, which is always a temptation, because there's a lot of good things that need to be done. There are a lot of challenges out in our community, but the key is obviously that it has to work, right? I mean, these are wonderful ideals, but if we can't deliver them right and we can't implement them and people don't feel good about them and good about the work that they're doing, then we're not going to get there. So I need to hear from you, and the team wants to hear from you of how we can help deal with that. Real quick about my role for this year. I've got a very finite contract with the Board of Trustees. I need to stop right now to tell you that I did a workshop with them in July to talk about board governance, relationships, how boards work, how they process the business that they do, what their expectations are under law, regulation, and here in this community. How that works with the president, you know, what are these roles, and how that works with the staff at the institution. We had a great retreat. They are a superb board. And you need to feel really good that you've got some community volunteers who are behind this institution and understand and are committed to moving us forward and helping us get the resource base we need to get there. So about five of our board members have been here within a year to 18 months, half of our board. I never had to deal with that when I was president here. Usually we'd had one new member, two new members. It's a lot of change, but these are really good people. What the board has asked me to do is two things. One is for this year to position this institution to recruit the best possible sixth president for Chesapeake College to help us move forward. And so it's making sure that the institution, that we're not leaving a lot on the plate for the new president to come in, right? We're trying to make sure we got things in good shape so we can move forward and don't have to go back and pick up some stuff. So I see that as prime responsibility that I have. And secondly, as you all know better than I do, we don't have a lot of resources, or certainly not all the resources that we need. And we couldn't afford, and frankly we didn't really feel like we needed to bring in a consultant, which can run about $150,000 a year, all things total, to do a search. So that's the other piece of my role, to help the board as a consultant, not as somebody driving the choice, but just providing the staff support in this very important job they have to do to select the sixth president of Chesapeake College. So, and in that light, this afternoon, if you're not aware of it, at 2:30, our board chair, Dr. Blenda Armistead, and our vice chair, Nash McMahon, are going to be in this room. They're going to talk very briefly about the search, such as it is, and by that I simply mean it's in its very early stages, but what some of the working assumptions are. And the point of having this session this afternoon before the board takes any action is to hear from you about any ideas you have about the search and about the process and about how we can engage the college community. I've met with the STARS representatives. I see Chris here out in front of me, and I've met with, and I know Juliet's here somewhere, and I've met with Juliet Smith and to talk about that. So they're well aware of what we're trying to achieve here, but we want to have a listening session. So don't feel you're required to attend, but if you have an interest in the search, which I hope that you do, you will join us at 2:30. It will not be a very long session. They'll make a few comments. I'll probably make a few comments, and then we want to hear from you. This is familiar with everybody, the new logo, but I wanted to maybe get you to think a little differently about what I guess is still called a tagline. Is this still called a tagline, Lucy? Your time and your place. And, you know, obviously when you develop this, you tend to think about your external audience, right? You think of your community, you think of the people you're trying to recruit, the students to get into your institution. But I want you to think of the tagline as you. as you. This is your time at Chesapeake, and it is your place. It's the thing that you have devoted and are devoting a big part of your life to this institution. When you look back on your career and the times you spent in any given institution, it's a big part of your life, right? So it is your place. And how this place supports you and your goals and objectives is absolutely critical. I was trying to catch up on some reading with the Chronicle, and there was an interesting article there on maybe July or something about, it was someone who was writing who had moved from a faculty position to a administrative position. And she was giving advice to some of these people, and we have some in this audience who've recently made that transition, right? And she was giving some advice to what to look ahead to and be aware of and things of that kind. But here's was an interesting summary that she said. She went back and tried to look at research on employee motivation, and here's what she quoted. Most of us are inspired by having a strong sense of purpose, number one, a fair amount of autonomy, number two, and an ability to demonstrate our personal strengths on a regular basis. If this is your place, this needs to be our ideal. This needs to be how you
land and water just
for. And when I looked at this, now what many of you don't know is that my background is in political science, and as my students will tell you, and all of us had a high school civics class. This phrase should readily come to mind, the pursuit of happiness. And when I just read that quote, it may seem strange I make this connection, but this is a concept I want to talk very briefly about and try to tie all this together this morning. The pursuit of happiness, as you well know, came out of some writing, well, it didn't come from the writing of Thomas Jefferson, but we became familiar with it because of the Declaration of Independence, but it's an old idea. The people, our founding fathers, really knew what they were talking about with this phrase. And it goes way back into, I'm in dangerous waters here because I've got a philosopher staring at me right in front of me about halfway through, but it goes way back to the Greeks. And But here was the notion. This wasn't about happiness as joy. It wasn't simply about some expression of unfettered freedom and liberty, which is sometimes how it plays out. It was really about that idea of self-fulfillment. And not just self-fulfillment as an individual, but self-fulfillment as a community. The two had to go hand in hand. One could not happen without the other. These were very familiar ideas to many of the framers, certainly to Jefferson. And as it links back to this quote I was reading about the workplace and your role within it, right? It's about your self-fulfillment, right? We are only going to be successful as an institution if individually we've invested, we've supported, and recognized that that's got to happen for you. You know, you have to have a sense of growth and fulfillment. We have to put the pieces in place, and we have a lot of them here. But it's also about our fulfillment as an institution, right? Achieving our mission and our fulfillment as a community, right? Because ultimately, the test is if we're doing our jobs well, we're not only growing and developing and reaching our potentials, but our community is doing that. Our citizens are doing that. And if all this works across the country, as the framers were hoping, at least in an ideal sense, we would be achieving that as a nation. We're certainly not there yet, but I see this, and the kind of thing that I thinking about is this is really what our business is, right? It's what our business should be within the institution for all of you, but it should be our business in the classroom, right? We're about helping our students reach their full potential, which I know all of you are committed to, or else you wouldn't be in the community college business. And we're about our community, making sure that that's happening for them as well. So I'm not proposing this as a new tagline, but I do think that it helps bring some pieces together. Now, no reason why you would know this, but this year happens to be the 70th anniversary of really what I consider to be a central document in the community college business. But this is very old for most of you. I was born at this juncture. I was born in 1944, but obviously don't remember this. But in the business of community colleges, this is really, I think, a real beginning. And to give you some context to this, President Harry Truman in 1946, and if you don't know this little bit about Harry Truman, he desegregated the military by executive order. Whenever he did that, I don't know the date, 1941 maybe, 42, that was no small act to move forward and desegregate the military through executive order. And so after the war, when all these people who had engaged in the war effort, women who suddenly either were in the workplace here for, doing the jobs of men who were out in the war, or women who were in the war themselves, minorities, ethnic, racial minorities, religious groups in this country who were out there fighting this cause, who were coming home and realizing that in many respects the country hadn't changed. It wasn't ready. And certainly higher education wasn't ready for these individuals to bring them into our colleges and universities. Not only were we not ready physically, we didn't welcome them. We didn't welcome women. We discriminated against a lot of minorities and religious groups. It wasn't uncommon to see higher education institutions have restrictions against the admission of Jews, for example, in colleges and universities. It's hard to imagine today, or maybe it isn't, unfortunately, but it's hard to imagine. But Truman, to his credit, realized that if we're going to, he didn't necessarily use this phrase, the pursuit of happiness, but if you read the report, it's all about this ideal. And recognize that this commission said that if we're going to get there, if we're going to begin to have jobs for these people coming back, if they're each going to have the opportunity in this country to realize their potential, we have got to tackle higher education, and it's got to change. And this is a quote that I will try to make this as big as possible, but this is a key quote from that report to give you a little flavor of what was driving the thinking of the Commission and the thinking of Harry Truman. If the ladder of educational opportunities rises high at the door of some youth and scarcely rises at all at the doors of others, while at the same time formal education is a prerequisite for occupational and social advance, which was certainly an emerging issue then and it's ditto now in spades, then education may become the means not of eliminating race and class distinctions, but of deepening and solidifying them. So it's obvious then that free and universal access, and here's what the Commission launched, this notion of universal access to higher education. Didn't bring it about, we don't have it today, but that was the ideal that it launched. Universal access to education in terms of interest, ability, and need of the students must be a major goal. So how are we going to get there? These were 3 key recommendations in that report. And they're interesting to look back on today. Look at the first one. This notion of free tuition, free public education through grade 14. Now, we don't think of grade 14 in our conversations today as a term, but what that meant was, it's our business. They foresaw the community college, the Commission foresaw the community college should be a free commitment for public education through grade 14. Interesting today, right? This is a hot topic, right? How are states trying to deliver on something that the Commission set as a goal and a target way back in 1947? Then there were a couple states that had embraced this. California, New York was doing it back then. They backed away from it for cost reasons, and now it's a new conversation. And it needs to be. The second idea was to create these state systems of, and the term, community colleges. The term of art at the time was junior colleges, as it related to how we developed at the turn of the 20th century. And so they said, no, these are not junior colleges, these are community colleges. They should be everywhere throughout this country, and they should, look at the third piece, not just be about what we call today transfer education or college parallel education, or probably a newer term than that. This is a decade and a half ago. But it should be also about adult education in the communities, and it should be about the kind of skills and career and technology training that are central to our communities and to developing job opportunities. All the things that we're embracing now as an institution, right? So we are forward thinking here, but the point is this is 1947. And you know, we've come a long way in these objectives. It took us a long time to get where we are. Really, the community college movement didn't get full steam until the 1960s when I came into the movement. They were hiring anybody who had a credential to teach, and that's the only reason why they hired me, because nobody would hire me today to teach. But that was enormous opportunities for a lot of us to get in this movement. So this is the movement, and this, I think, is its philosophical origins for who we are as institutions today. Now, and I want to just wrap up by thinking about, this was 70 years ago, right? And all these groups that were returning, you know, you desegregate the military, but did we desegregate the institutions in this country when they came back? No. No more than we did in World War I. And so then I witnessed, as many of you did, the events in Charlottesville recently, right? And just reading the language on the signs of the demonstrators, right? You could have blinked your eyes and imagined yourself watching some sort of a newsreel in the 1930s or the 1940s. And so here we are 70 years later, this wonderful vision about the central role of community colleges in opening up universal access to education. And we have individuals and groups in our country who talk about racial superiority, who talk about religious bigotry, and I begin to worry how far we've come in spite of those assumptions. So I asked Marcy to kind of dig out. I knew we had articulated some values in this area, and in our catalog and elsewhere, I guess we've had for some time a set of core values, right? And we have a lot of statements that we give to our students, and I guess what I'm trying to bring for full circle here is this vision about the pursuit of happiness for all of our people, without regard to race or ethnicity or religious interest or affiliation or any other way we tend to distinguish one from another. And what our obligations are as an institution to fulfill this commitment to the pursuit of happiness, right? So one of our core values that we have, and we share with our students, is obviously diversity and respect, right? And then we have this language: an equal opportunity for all persons. We're committed to equal opportunity for all persons, and that no person shall be excluded from participation or be denied the benefits or otherwise subjected to discrimination under any program or activity of this college. I know we have a diversity committee here at Chesapeake College, and I know Eleanor's out here somewhere, and I know she and I had a brief discussion about it, although not in this context. And I guess what I'm asking you to do as I look ahead about what our responsibility is with this kind of dialogue that we're witnessing today is that we've got in our community a responsibility to fulfill these core values, to live them and to demonstrate them, and to make sure for all of our community and for all of the students who come to us and for all of you who come to this institution and commit your time and talents to it, this is our obligation. And so we need to we need to talk about that, and we need to be clear that we've got to, in my judgment, speaking for myself, we've certainly got to challenge those who would threaten the very essence of who we are as an institution, and certainly humanity as a whole, which on occasion I get a little worried about it, but I'm very old. I'm sure we're above that, but this is our commitment, and we need to embrace it, and we need to support it and move forward with it. So, ran longer than I intended, but thank you for your time this morning, and have a great day.